My son laughed at me in front of his wife, until I took the keys and turned the tables. The night my son laughed at me in front of his wife, I didn't say a word. I just stood up, walked to the key bowl by the door and put his future in my pocket. My name is Daniel Whitfield. I'm 67 years old, and until 11 months ago, I ran a construction company I built from a single pickup truck and a box of hand tools. I poured the foundation of half the houses in this town. I also poured the foundation for my son's entire life, his college tuition, his first apartment, the down payment on the house he now called his own, and yes, the keys to Whitfield Construction itself, which I had signed over to him 8 months earlier when my knees finally told me it was time to slow down. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was doing what a good father does, hand over the ladder once you've climbed it, so your son doesn't have to start from the ground floor. What I didn't expect was that the moment I stepped back, my son Ryan would start acting like he'd built the ladder himself. It started small. He stopped calling to ask my opinion on jobs. Then he stopped mentioning me at all when clients asked who'd built the company. Then came the dinner. Ryan and his wife Camille invited me over on a Sunday evening, the kind of formal invitation that should have told me something was off, because usually I just showed up with a six-pack and let myself in. But this time there was a reservation-style dinner, cloth napkins, the good plates Camille's mother had given them as a wedding gift. I remember thinking, this is nice, maybe things are getting back to normal. I was wrong. Halfway through the meal, Camille, who I'd always liked, always thought was sharper than she let on, asked me a simple, kind question. Daniel, is it true you used to sleep in your truck on job sites when you were starting out? Ryan told me that story once. I smiled. It was true. There'd been a winter decades ago, when money was so tight I slept in the cab of my Ford with a space heater running off a battery pack, just so I could save on a motel and put that money toward payroll for my 2 employees. I was proud of that story. It was the story of how everything after it became possible. But before I could answer, Ryan let out a short, sharp laugh, the kind that isn't really about humor, the kind that's meant to cut. Yeah, back when Dad thought duct tape and stubbornness were a business plan, he said, swirling the wine in his glass. It's cute, but let's be honest, the company didn't really take off until I came in and modernized things. Dad ran it like it was 1985. I dragged it into an actual functioning business. Camille's smile faltered. She glanced at me, then at him, like she wasn't sure if this was a joke I was supposed to laugh along with. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of looking wounded, so I just picked my fork back up. Is that right? I said, keeping my voice level. I mean no offense, Ryan said, in that tone people use right before they say something offensive. But you're retired now. You had your run. It's a different game now, margins, software, marketing. You built the bones, sure, I built the business. Camille tried to smooth it over. Ryan. What? It's true, he said, laughing again, softer this time, but somehow worse because it was so casual. Like I wasn't even worth raising his voice for. Dad, don't take it personal. You did good for your time, but I'm not gonna pretend I don't know what I brought to the table. I sat there for a moment, 67 years old, in my son's dining room, being told by my own child, in front of his wife, over a dinner I'd half paid for the ingredients of because I'd dropped by the store on my way over, old habit, that my life's work was a quaint prelude to his real achievement. Here's the thing nobody tells you about getting older. It's not the big betrayals that gut you. It's the small ones, delivered with a laugh, at a dinner table, by someone who used to fall asleep on your chest as a baby. I didn't yell, I didn't even correct him, not right then. I just finished my dinner, complimented Camille on the pot roast, which was genuinely good, and thanked them both for having me. Ryan didn't walk me to the door. He was scrolling his phone by the time I stood up. But on my way out, I stopped at the little ceramic bowl by their entryway, the one Camille kept spare keys in, including the extra key fob to the company truck Ryan drove, and the set of keys to the office building, which I still technically co-owned on paper because in my excitement to hand things over, I'd never actually finished transferring the property deed. 8 months of I'll get to it, and lawyer appointments Ryan kept rescheduling because he was too busy running things. I picked up that second set, the office keys, turned them over once in my palm, and slipped them into my coat pocket. Ryan didn't even notice, he was still on his phone. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I am not a vindictive man. I didn't drive home that night plotting revenge like some old fool in a movie. I drove home quiet, hurt, replaying the sound of my son's laugh, trying to figure out when exactly he'd started seeing me as something to be embarrassed by instead of something to be grateful for. But somewhere around the second red light, the hurt started curdling into something clearer, something closer to clarity than anger. Because here's what Ryan didn't know, or had conveniently forgotten in his new corner office with his name freshly etched on the glass door. The modernizing, he was so proud of the new software, the sleek branding, the fancy truck wraps. All of it had been financed through a business line of credit that I had personally guaranteed. My name, my signature, my 30 years of credit history were the only reason the bank had approved it. Ryan's credit at the time was barely enough to lease a car. And the office building, the one his name was now on the door of, the deed was still, legally, in my name and my late wife's family trust, because in the rush of handing him the company, we'd never finished the property transfer. Ryan had been managing the business believing he owned the building it operated out of. He didn't, not yet, not on paper. I hadn't planned to use any of that as leverage. Honestly, I'd been planning to finish the transfer that very month as a surprise, a final gift, the last piece of the puzzle, fully in his name, no strings. But strings, I decided that night, were exactly what my son needed. The next morning, I called my lawyer, an old friend named Marcus who'd handled my affairs for 20 years and who, frankly, had been telling me for months that I was moving too fast handing everything to Ryan without proper structure. "You built a company with sweat and math, Daniel," he'd said once. "Don't hand it off with your heart instead." I told him to pause the deed transfer indefinitely. I told him I wanted a meeting with Ryan, a real one, in an office, not over dinner, to discuss some outstanding paperwork on the business. Ryan showed up to that meeting expecting a formality. He walked in wearing the blazer he only wore for client pitches, the confident stride of a man who thought he already owned the room. "Dad, Marcus, what's this about? I've got a walkthrough at the Miller property in 40 minutes. "Sit down, Ryan," I said. Something in my voice must have registered, because he sat. Marcus laid it out plainly, the way lawyers do, no drama, just facts. The office building was still under the family trust. The business line of credit was still under my personal guarantee, meaning I could pull it at any time, which would immediately cut off Ryan's access to payroll funds and equipment financing. The company's original LLC paperwork, the one Ryan had modernized with a fresh logo and letterhead, still listed me as majority stakeholder, because the transfer of controlling shares, the actual legal transfer, not just the verbal one at his celebratory dinner 8 months ago, had never been finalized either. I watched the blood drain slowly from my son's face as Marcus talked. "Wait," Ryan said, laughing, but this laugh was different than the one at dinner. This one was nervous, searching. "Wait, this is Dad, I run the company. Everyone knows I run the company." "You run the day-to-day," I said. "You always have these past months and you've done some good things with it, I won't pretend otherwise. The scheduling software is smart. The new client intake process is smart, but running something and owning it are two different things, Ryan. I think somewhere in the last 8 months you forgot which one you actually had." "So what is this? Some kind of power trip? Because I made one joke at dinner." "It wasn't a joke," I said quietly. "A joke we laugh at together. What you did last night was tell your wife in front of me that everything I built before you showed up was a quaint accident, that my life's work was training wheels for your real business. You said I had my run. You said it with a laugh, Ryan, like I wasn't sitting right there." He didn't have anything to say to that. His jaw tightened. Camille had told me, in a brief call that morning that I hadn't asked her to make but was grateful for anyway, that after I left, she told Ryan the same thing, that what he said had embarrassed her, not because it was about me, but because of how easily, how casually cruel it had been. "I'm not taking the company back," I told him, and I meant it. "I'm not interested in running trucks and crews at 67. My knees have made that decision for me already, but I am not finishing that deed transfer, and I am not leaving my name on that line of credit until I see something from you." "See what?" "Respect," I said, "not gratitude. I'm not asking you to thank me every day for a company I already gave you. I'm asking you to remember out loud in front of the people who matter that you didn't build this alone from nothing. You built on a foundation. I poured that foundation with my own hands, some nights literally sleeping in a truck to make payroll. That story you laughed at last night. That story is the reason you had a company at 28, instead of having to build one from a truck yourself at 45, the way I did." The weeks that followed were tense. Ryan didn't call for the first 10 days, pride, I assume, or maybe genuine anger, and I understood both. I didn't reach out either. Marcus told me this was normal, that men in my family apparently needed silence the way some people needed sleep, necessary if uncomfortable. It was Camille who eventually called, not to plead Ryan's case exactly, but to tell me something I hadn't known. Since taking over, Ryan had been quietly terrified. Every client meeting, every subcontractor negotiation, he told her he felt like he was performing a version of confidence he didn't fully have, because underneath it he knew that the calm, easy authority I'd carried for 30 years wasn't something you inherited with a business card. It was something you built, mistake by mistake, bad job by bad job, slowly, over decades. He's not laughing at you because he thinks he's better than you, Daniel, Camille said, careful with her words. I think he's laughing because he's scared he's not as good as you, and it's easier to joke about it than admit it. That landed somewhere I hadn't expected. I'd spent 2 weeks assuming my son's laughter was arrogance. Camille was suggesting it might have been armor. It didn't excuse it. I still believe, and still believe now, that a grown man does not get to humiliate his father at a dinner table and call it modernization, but it gave me somewhere to stand besides anger. Ryan came to my house on a Tuesday evening, unannounced, which was the first thing that told me this wasn't going to be another performance. He looked tired, not defeated, tired, the particular tired of a man who has been carrying something heavy and finally set it down long enough to feel how heavy it actually was. We sat on the porch, the same porch where he used to do his homework as a kid, while I fixed lawnmower engines in the driveway to make extra cash on weekends. I've been thinking about what you said, he told me, about the truck, about sleeping in it. It's just a story, Ryan. No, it's not, he said, and his voice cracked slightly, which surprised us both. It's not just a story, Dad. It's the whole thing, isn't it? That's the whole company. That's every job we've ever gotten, every client who trusted us because Whitfield Construction had 30 years of not screwing people over. I've been acting like the software and the branding are the business. They're not the business, you're the business. You just handed me the keys to something that took you 3 decades to build, and I spent 8 months acting like I built the locks. I didn't say anything. I let him keep going, because I could tell he needed to say it more than I needed to hear it, though God knows I needed to hear it too. I was scared, he admitted. Every time someone asked me a technical question I didn't fully know the answer to, every time a foreman looked at me a beat too long before doing what I asked, I felt like an imposter. And instead of saying that, I turned it into jokes about how outdated you were. Like if I could shrink what you built, my own shoes would fit better. He looked at me. That's not fair to you. It was never about you being outdated. It was about me being scared. You embarrassed me in front of Camille, I said, because it needed to be said plainly one more time, not to punish him, but so it was fully understood. Not just the joke, the laugh. That's the part that stuck with me. You laughed like I was something to be gotten past. I know, he said. I'm sorry, Dad, really sorry. Not the kind of sorry you say to end an argument, the kind where I actually see it now. I nodded slowly, and something in my chest, which had been clenched for 2 weeks, finally loosened. The deed transfer, I said. I'll finish it. Properly this time, done right, with Marcus overseeing everything, no more loose ends. And I'll release the personal guarantee on the credit line once you've got 6 more months of clean statements to qualify on your own, not because I don't trust you, but because a business should stand on its own legs, and so should you. That's fair, he said, more than fair. And Ryan, I waited until he looked at me. The next time you feel like joking about where you came from, remember, you're not just building a business. You're building what your own kids will inherit someday. Build it on respect. That's the only foundation that actually holds. He nodded, and for the first time in 8 months, I saw something in his face that looked less like a man performing confidence and more like a man beginning, quietly, to earn it. I still have that spare key to the office building. I never gave it back, not really. I had a new one cut for Ryan instead, and I keep the original in a drawer in my kitchen, next to a photograph of the 2 of us standing in front of the very first job site I ever owned, back when the whole crew was just me and a rented cement mixer. Some nights I take it out and look at it, not because I need the leverage anymore, but because it reminds me of something worth remembering. Sometimes the most loving thing a father can do isn't handing his son everything all at once. Sometimes it's holding one small thing back just long enough so that his son learns to reach for it with both hands and means it.